Just a little bit about me. This is on the website. The important bits are at the top. I'm really involved with the Lean Kanban University and the Kanban movement, sort of North America, globally. So, yeah, I know somebody. Right now I'm on the management board for Lean Kanban University. I'm also Imagine representative on the advisory board for the Lean Kanban University's accredited training program. And I'm a trainer and a Kanban coaching professional. I've been in Calgary like pretty much my whole IT career, traveling a lot in the last 2 years, last year and a half with ImagineNet. But this is something that's I've really grown into, and I'm excited to talk to you guys about. So just a little bit about why I found Kanban. And so just take a quick look at this screen and tell me if any of these things resonate with any of you. If anything on this board resonates with you, put your hand up. Everybody's nodding, hands up. This is something that, I still do development work over the course of Kanban or Agile coaching engagements. And usually I'm coming into a company and then they're having problems, so that's why I'm there. And these are a lot of things that we hear all the time. And so these are all sort of symptoms of problems that we have in our industry. So there is a ton of knowledge work to do. I don't think that there's any worry about any of us not having jobs because of lack of work in the near future. But everybody wants it today. And we don't have enough capacity to give it to them today. They think that software just magically appears. And that's partially our fault too, but when we get into these situations, we have tons of work, not enough ability to deliver that work in the time frames that they want, what do we start dropping? And I'll harp on this one often. First thing that gets dropped is quality. I'm in a rush. I'll clean it up later. But there's more work to do later, and we never actually come back and clean it up. So we create work for ourselves by not dealing with quality. Next thing that happens is features either get delayed or they get put off to the side. They just get dropped. Yeah, okay, we don't need that. We'll leave it for later. Which is really not beneficial for the end users. They actually sort of wanted that. And we actually had, without giving them an opportunity to see what it would have been like, it's really hard for them to determine the value. And they're actually not really good at prioritizing without being able to see things in the first place. So when we drop features, we're losing opportunities to really do something cool as a business. We start to accumulate technical debt. You want to go back and refactor something, make it a little bit easier to own, but you just never get time. You're just too busy. And this is something that's really hard, is we actually don't know how much work we have to do. We're really bad, generally speaking, as a group of people to get our work and see it. Our work is all up here. It's all creative. We're all artists, right? And to say how many paintings are in your head or how long it will take to get that thing out of your head into the thing, I really believe that it's really hard for us to visualize how much work we actually do have because it's an idea. And we also don't know how fast we are working or can work. So these are again sort of some of the problems, and when you overburden people like this, we tend to get disengaged, which slows us down. When you're happy, you work faster. Whoever here has had a late night pro coding session, they put their headphones on or they were playing their music and they were just happy and they got lots of stuff done. Imagine if you had that every day. I know that means we're all humans and we're all have good days and bad days, but part of what I like to talk about here is that our environments are actually promoting overburdening, which disengages us. So we're actually purposefully slowing ourselves down. But it's hard to tell because we don't know how much work or how much capacity we actually have. There's another problem to me, and this is where I start to get a little bit evangelical about things. Why is this still a problem? As an industry, we've been trying to solve this problem for how long?
Since we started.
Right? Winston Royce in 1970 created his paper that became the waterfall method, which, by the way, on the second page, recommended an iterative approach. In 1970, he was trying to solve this problem with his white paper. And prior to that, there had been DoD projects that had been doing things iteratively and incrementally. So we can go back as far as the 50s in knowledge work where we're trying to solve these problems. And we still haven't quite got there. So that's kind of why I continue to look for better ways for human beings to work in knowledge work. So I didn't just get here today talking to you guys about Kanban by accident or just instantly. I've had a bit of a journey, and I've got some experiences that are, making me want to really talk to you guys about Kanban. So what's still out there? What kind of problems do I get asked to come and help people solve? So we've got chaos, which is, my word for no process. Companies, they're just doing work without any kind of rhyme or reason. They've got different business users come and say, I need this now today, or I need that tomorrow, and this VP came down, so drop everything and do this now. And they're not even really taking the time to understand how their process works. They haven't really defined it, or they couldn't define it. There's still a lot of waterfall out there. Most organizations that I encounter are very waterfall-centric, very traditional PMI project management organizations. They have a PMO. The IT groups tend to get to do their own little thing for a little while within the project, but there's still all these demands being driven by a PMO sort of a centric approach to managing and reporting work. They still schedule your projects. They still ask you to estimate something that's 24 months long, which is hard, virtually impossible. And we still have Scrum. And Scrum is a good thing, don't get me wrong. But, all of us are still going along looking for something better or more. We are still having these problems. We still sometimes don't even understand why they're not working. Chaos obviously doesn't work because it's unmanaged. Waterfall doesn't work because there's this large batch, single flow mentality to waterfall. Here's this one project, we'll just do it all. And the point that I don't like about most traditional organizations is that if a project is struggling or failing, we just didn't manage it well enough. We just didn't estimate it well enough. Which to me is kind of, I don't want to be kind, but it's a little bit insulting because we're all professionals in this room and you were all asked, can you give me your best estimate for something? Either an effort or a calendar date. You've got a project manager in the room and the project's failing and we didn't manage it well enough. It's not the people who are the problem. It's the process and the methodologies that we use against something that is not well suited for. And Scrum is definitely better. Scrum is way better. And I'll use the words, I'll talk about it in a second, but I'll use the word Scrum and not so much Agile in general. Scrum is way better. It is the dominant Agile methodology in the world. Everybody, XP is out there in little pockets. There's DSDM, Crystal, they're out there in little pockets, but really Scrum won the Agile methodologies war. And it's good, it's better. It shortens our feedback loops. It gets developers trying to be more and owning the estimates, giving them periods of time in which to work unbothered, but it's still not quite right. There's something about Scrum that just doesn't fit in everyone. That's because Scrum is relatively prescriptive. You do these 10 things and you're doing Scrum. But if some of those things don't work for your organization, then what do? Some people will say you're not doing Scrum anymore. You're doing Scrum, but. So that's where Scrum, a lot of it is about prescriptive, agile approaches as opposed to being context aware and continuously striving to improve over time with using whatever techniques and tactics work best for you. And another thing about this is just in general, adoption is hard because people are weird, right? I have no idea how my team is going to behave on any given day. And I don't know what is going through their heads when they're thinking about solving a particular problem, and it could be completely not at all what I was thinking. And software development knowledge work is a team of people that you could call a machine, but they're not a machine that's going to behave in a consistent, normal fashion. They're not cogs in a wheel, cogs in a machine, but they are a system of creative, talented people who are really weird. So convincing those people to work in a certain fashion is hard. And so this is where, about 2 years ago, I arrived at being exposed to the Kanban method. So, now, before I get too far ahead, who here has heard the word Kanban before? Okay. I'll just pick on some. What's Kanban mean to you? Just what you've heard. It's not right or wrong, just.
All I've heard about it is you have kind of stories with Agile. There's not really a defined release. It's more of you go to work, this is the priority, and just keep working on it.
Right. Okay. So it's kind of describing kind of an agile-y kind of thing, but we've given it a different name, and that's common. What about you?
More of a code method where
Yeah.
developers say, what to do, I'm just going to go and put some summary ready to break it.
Okay.
It is not, they can handle it.
Right. And that's another common definition of Kanban. How about yourself?
I really related to the visual yellow sticky method.
Okay, so card walls
Yeah.
are Kanbans, right? So this is something that I'm going to be preaching about as much as I can. This is a great opportunity. Thank you guys very much. There's a lot of confusion about what the word Kanban means. And so just so you know, I'll use the word Kanban. That's how the Japanese say it. It's a Japanese word. If you are anywhere in North America, you can say Kanban, and that is just as accepted. But the Japanese say Kanban, so I'll just defer to them. So there's a lot of confusion about the word Kanban. And that's good because it actually means a whole bunch of things. It's overloaded quite a bit and used quite a bit. So a Kanban, very simply, is some sign, some visual sign. If you look, the Spice Cafe placard it's a Kanban in Japanese word, or in Japanese definition. It's a sign saying that there's a restaurant here and it's open. You can see it and you can go do something. In the 1950s, Taiichi Ono, who is sort of the grandfather of the Toyota production system, building off of the works of W. Edward Deming, they started to create these lean manufacturing systems, which have come to be called Kanban systems. And this is a pull-based system that has visual indicators that something needs to happen, right? You guys most of you probably visit a Kanban system every day when you go to Starbucks. You go to the till and you order your coffee and the cup comes out and goes on the counter. And the barista's like, oh, I have to do something. There is some demand to be satisfied now. The cup is a visual signal to do something. And I'm sure Starbucks does this, not every Starbucks store, but often they'll probably study their stores. How long does it take a cup to get through to the customer's hand? Comes out of the after they wrote your name on it, put it on the counter, how long does it take to get through? This is kind of a lean manufacturing technique for visual or for monitoring our work and how quickly things go through our system. So we've got Kanban visual signals. We have Kanban systems, which are workflows that have a pull-based mechanic. Generally, they're also going to have some sort of whip limit. some sort of limiting factor. And by nature of a pull system, you will have limits. You will only pull things through the system as quickly as you can. And then there's the Kanban method. And that's when I say Kanban, I'm almost always talking about the Kanban method in general. If I want to talk about the Kanban system that's at the heart of an implementation, I'll usually say our Kanban system. So just for you guys, if someone asks you about Kanban, you can say, well, what Kanban are you talking about? The signal, the system, or the method? I don't know if there's any others out there that I have to worry about. So what is the Kanban method? And this is where the Kanban method is probably different than what you expected. So the Kanban method is an approach to incremental evolutionary process change for organizations. That's the 5-second speech about what the Kanban method is. Because most of our work is going through some sort of workflow, going through some sort of process. It is not the people who are failing or not doing their best work. It is the process that is somehow slowing us down. So that's what the Kanban method is. So these are kind of the bullet points that have drew me to the Kanban method as, I don't want to call it a silver bullet, but I think that if organizations can adopt the Kanban method as an approach to improvement, we actually can start to solve some of the problems that we had on that first slide. The Kanban method is designed to be context sensitive. You know, any Kanban coach who comes into your organization to help you do something, he's not going to say, okay, we have to change everything. Well, a good Kanban coach won't. You know, if I came into your organization and said, okay, let's see how you are working now. Before I change anything, how do you work now? Let's understand the context in which you guys are working, what your problems are. Because I'm being observant before I make changes, I want to learn. So the Kanban method is actually designed to foster organizational learning. And as we learn about our problems, we can now improve. We can actually get better in a measured approach. So we can do those in small little bits. And that's why I've got the Kaizen there, right? Who here has heard the word Kaizen? Back there? It's a Japanese word for to make better. In the Kanban culture, Kaizen are these little opportunities for improvement that might emerge from your organization. And they can emerge from anywhere. Right? If you've got a coder who says, hey, I think that if we had ReSharper, we could be faster. That's actually a little Kaizen thing. Right? You don't need to have a manager coming down, I think you should all use ReSharper. The cool thing about the Kanban method is actually a bunch of simple rules that are used to govern a complex system. A software development team is a complex system because people are weird. So
You don't just mean the developers, right? You mean
no, I just mean the whole people are weird. You just take anybody who's doing knowledge work, from the CEO down to that intern coder. We are all weird. When you clump us up together, we've got this amplifying weirdness effect. It's just fun. The Kanban method isn't, so it's an incremental evolutionary approach to process change. So it has some things in it that say work this way. We think they're better ways of working, but for the most part, what you are actually trying to do is to make your current process better. Whether it's a traditional, a Scrum, some variant, some Scrum Bot, some Chaos, the idea is that we can actually use the Kanban method to get better. So with that premise, agile methods will emerge. An agile methodology can emerge from a Kanban implementation. It doesn't necessarily always emerge. Most time it is, because it's a better way to work for human beings from a people perspective, but it is fully supportive of the Agile Manifesto. It also is fully supportive of the lean principles for software development that Mary Poppendieck put in her book, right? So, and there is a lot of conversation about overlap between the lean principles and the Agile Manifesto as it is, but if you just treat them even both as separate, you can still strive to do all of those things. Just some are slightly different wording about it. The Kanban method, for the most part, is tactic agnostic. I'm not going to come in and tell you that anything is wrong with what you do now. I don't know that it's wrong for what you do. I don't know your organization. And if there's a specific tactic that's really good for your organization, we should use it, whether it's out of the PMBOK, out of the Scrum Guide, out of some guy's blog post. The Kanban method is actually about getting better. Always getting better, using whatever tool we have to get better. And again, it is intended to be a catalyst for organizational improvement. And I'll have a little bit of a slide later on that highlights that. How are we doing for time?
It's 12:30.
Okay, I'll try to do that. So the Kanban method, so that little blurb there, we got agile principles, we've got lean principles. The Kanban method sort of takes all of them. And there are 4 principles and 6 practices, and it's really easy to get started. It is really easy to get started with the Kanban method. First of all, the principles. These are sort of how we start and sort of the guiding light of how you should be thinking when you've got a Kanban method implementation. Always start with what you do now. Don't come in and throw everything out, right? You are going to you're going to take a productivity hit that you do not need to take. The next thing is, okay, now that we've decided that we're going to get better, let's all make sure that everybody involved agrees that we are going to incrementally and evolutionarily improve. You know, the CTO who comes in and says, tomorrow we're all doing Scrum, that's a revolutionary change. The CTO who brings in a Kanban coach and says, what should we do next? And I said, well, let's see what we should do next. After a couple weeks of watching, hey, how about we introduce this cadence for this particular ceremony? Or let's try and measure our work in this way. We can do these little incremental improvements to try and get better. Initially, we want to respect current roles, responsibilities, and job titles. And this is partially because that people are weird thing. If I came up to any of you today, I don't know how you'd feel about it, but if I said your title is not what you were not a senior software developer anymore. It's like, hey, I'm a senior software developer. That's important to me. And a lot of times when we do these change initiatives, that will happen. You get told that you're not doing that thing anymore, which demotivates people, which is not what we want. We want all these process changes to encourage improvement from all areas of the organization. We want people to be engaged. And to that point, we need to encourage acts of leadership. We need to make sure that the people in our organization feel empowered to suggest a change, which is a small little leadership thing. So these are the 4 principles. If you believe that you could do all of these things, you're well suited to start doing Kanban, to start doing a Kanban method implementation. Now okay, well, what do we do? We're starting to do all of this stuff. There's some things that we need to actually do to start improvement. This is where there's a little bit of tactics, but not a lot of detail in those tactics. So the first thing that we always suggest people do is visualize our work. And that's not visualize the output of our work, but visualize us working. Who here has a Kanban board, or a Scrum board, or some sort of visual tracking tool? Okay, just a couple in the room. If you don't have one of those, how do you see how much work you have to do? Is it a line in a spreadsheet? Or TFS, or Jira, or whatever? You don't see that. And we don't see our progress on specific stories or things.
Are you talking strictly a physical visualization somewhere in
Yeah.
the room? Not
Yeah,
a,
like, well,
not a
so-
website that we would go to. But
Yeah, well, it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical Kanban board. Just some sort of visualization that is easily accessible and shows you. Human beings are very visual, right? I mean, this is part of the Kanban, like using Kanban, Japanese definition, is sign, visual cue. That's the big part of, one of the reasons why this is called Kanban. really like visual signs.
So would something
And-
like Trello be?
Yep, Trello would be a great tool. I mean, you can visualize with a Scrum tool, Team Pulse, TFS 2012, version 1, Rally. They all have good digital boards. I'm actually kind of a proponent of digital boards, but that's a different conversation. But for the most part, our work is invisible until we decide to purposefully make it visible, and then we can see the mountains of stuff that we're doing. We can see progress. You know, if you wrote 1,000 lines of code, I don't know if you're 10% done or you're done. I don't know what, like 1,000 lines of code doesn't mean anything in knowledge work, right? But a task being done means something, and seeing that this thing decomposed into 10 tasks, like seeing it, is emotionally impactful. And watching those stickies move across a board or move across a digital board is impactful. So the first thing we always want you to do is try and visualize it. Understand your workflow, visualize your work flowing through it. It can be easy to start. It can be complicated to get going, keep going, but you can get really advanced visualizations. But so on this board right here, what could you just tell immediately by looking at this?
What are 3 things that we're working on?
You're working on 3 things. You have a pretty big backlog by comparison. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's not resolved. I don't know why it's not resolved, but it's building up. But like just by seeing this, you get a sense of how these stories are progressing. And this is a very simple visualization. Usually on the teams I'm in, I've usually got stories and I've got tasks. Tasks tend to flow across the board quickly. Stories tend to move, 3 or 4 stories per iteration or something like that, depending on the size of the team, right? But stories move slowly. Tasks move quickly. Tasks are, more fine-grained, and they provide a good indication. So visualize your work. It's really important. The next thing we want to do is we want to limit WIP. Who here regularly feels like they're multitasking? Okay. There are a couple studies out there. I should have actually put the slide in the deck here. And they did it on a project scale, but the efficiency of a project when you're flipping projects, it's painful. When you're switching 4 things, you're doing 80% switching and 20% work. Right? There is a context thing. Humans don't multitask. We context switch quickly, but there's a cost. And if you were asking people to context switch all the time, then you're just slowing them down. And there's usually not a reason. Usually this is where the people are weird and we're emotional and we're acting crazy. It's like, oh, I need this now. Well, can I finish this and that thing that you need now? I can actually, if the Kanban system has been running for a while, I can guarantee that it'll be done in 5 days. Oh, okay, yeah. Or, without visualizing our work and understanding the impact of these emergency expedite work items, we can't even see the impact of them because we're not visualizing our work. We're not tracking those kinds of behaviors. So it is really valuable to limit WIP. And this is one of the things, so if you visualize your workflow, you're good, but you're not really you haven't really built a Kanban system yet. As soon as you put WIP limits in, now you're going to get into a pull-based mechanic for doing work, and you are going to find the bottlenecks in your system. And you will find the true capacity of your system. If you've got a tester and he can only test 2 stories a week, that is the true capacity. It doesn't matter if the developers make 20 of them. Except now, he made 20 of them, just don't worry about them. Leave quality, push them through, which makes work for us later when we're fixing all this stuff. Or we could just hire another tester. Or we could invest in unit testing, or automation, or coded UI, or something. As soon as we limit WIP, though, we're really going to have a Kanban system at the core of the way that we work. And just so you guys know, a Scrum iteration is a pull kind of thing. The developers pull the work they think they can do in 2 weeks into their iteration. So even Scrum, I might get beat by it if this gets out. Even Scrum is a pull-based mechanic system for managing work. Just it's rather coarse-grained.
So in the backlog there, you're going by items, but it doesn't indicate how big the item is.
Yes.
You
So
can you talk about that? Or?
I'll tell you. So generally, Kanban wants the team to try and make the item as small as possible. Like, we want to reduce variability, so if you can get all your items to be about the same size, that's a good thing. That's really hard. So one of the things that we can actually do is if we watch items flowing through the system, there are actually visualizations that I could show you that will show you, oh, these are smalls, these are mediums, and these are larges. And they flow through our systems in these kinds of fashions. And you will actually, the sizes that you have will kind of emerge. So Kanban as a methodology does not really advocate estimation. It does advocate sorting. And I hope that difference, we can talk about that afterwards if you're interested. Just the difference between sorting and estimation. Because nobody expects sorting to be very precise. But everybody expects estimates to be very precise. The third tactic is to manage flow. And in order to do that, we have to have a visualization, usually of some sort. This is a cumulative flow diagram out of TFS 2012. Cumulative flow diagrams are very popular in Kanban implementations. They're really powerful tools. Some people will say, oh, I don't need it. Some people will say, I need it. It's not that important. But there's a lot of information that can be derived out of here if you're interested in digging into a CFD. But one thing here is like, okay, so what can you tell me about the gray thing?
Didn't move for a long time.
Well, I mean, so the gray is new items, right? New in my backlog. So first thing I tell is every 2 weeks or every week they're replenishing their backlog, or they're putting stuff into their backlog. So I can see a cycle starting to emerge. And if we look at the CFD, it's like, oh, well, this is roughly what they actually do. I don't have to actually go ask anybody. You can sort of see it happening. We can see that, right here, we got this widening. Stuff we got a lot of stuff inactive and stuff wasn't getting done, right? This is a really simple thing, but by looking at CFDs, we get these visual indicators that we need to go dig into something that doesn't look quite right. And one of the things about Kanban is we want to reduce variability of work items flowing through the system so that they flow as consistently as possible. People are really far more interested in predictability than they are in promises. Make your process policies explicit. You are a system. Describe it. Make sure that everybody knows the rules of the game. If you play a game and you don't know the rules, you're going to cheat. Or someone's going to cheat. Just because they didn't know the rules. The Scrum Master in a Scrum implementation is really someone who's making sure that the Scrum policies are not violated by the other organization. In a Kanban system, you actually want the system itself to try and do that. So we can have policies written down at the bottom of our Kanban columns. We can actually have some sort of explicit policies describing our methodology and how it works. Make sure that that's available to everybody. Otherwise, it's something that's in your head, it's not known, and it's going to bite you in the ass. Develop feedback mechanisms. We are doing creative work. You are pulling an idea, I'm pulling an idea out of your head and making it real. And the more frequently that I can do checks with you to see if it's real, or it's really what you want, the more likely I'm going to stop investing in wrong decisions. The more frequently we do quality checks. So I've got, stand-ups are feedback mechanisms, talking about how we're working, continuous integration builds, or automated feedback that you broke something or you didn't. We've got an ops review here where the team itself is telling the organization how well they're doing or what challenges they're facing. We need to have people involved, engaged, solving problems because the problems are emerging all the time. and there's always something that we can do to get better. And the tighter those feedback mechanisms are, the more quickly we will adapt and make improvements. And the last one is improve collaboratively with science. There's a lot of voodoo magic in story points, in gummy bears, velocity. It's kind of transient. And the team's idea of what a 5 is even changes over time, but the number doesn't. Right? Their velocity, they're going to do things, I've seen it all the time. People start to, let's do this one story, and it's not really a 1, but it's a 1. We get our story point credits. Right? The thing about a Kanban method implementation is that we are, when a story starts and when it finishes, is usually the only thing that we're really interested in. And that's the fact. That's how long it took us to do it. There's no estimation, there's no guessing, there's no trying to meet some limit. That thing took that long to do. And now with that information, we can predict when something else like that thing, sorting, is going to get done. And we actually see how many we're actually doing and how long they're taking. And if we had 50 of them, how long would that take? Right? We're actually using real, concrete, quantitative metrics to understand our work and how it flows. So with that point, a friend of mine, Daniel Vacante, he said this: Kanban is an unapologetic, realistic representation of the laws of physics. You cannot say that story didn't start when you pulled it on and stopped when you finished, and that it took this much time, and that there were 5 stories in the backlog. Like, as soon as we start to just visualize and capture the way that we work, a whole bunch of things are going to start to happen because you've got real data. We're not using estimates to fudge stuff. We're not using velocity or story points to abstract stuff, which are, like, understand why they're important, because we need, as development teams, to get some of the pressure off, and give me some way to save face and give myself some space and time to do work. And these are some of the tactics that we developed within the Agile movement. But Kanban doesn't like those things. Let's talk about what's real and improve with what's real. So why are we doing all of this? So why are all these things? And the real reason is we want to create a learning capability in an organization that allows continuous improvement. And this is one of the key things that I think differentiates Scrum as it's described, not necessarily as it's implemented or as it should be implemented. Scrum as it's described and the Kanban method. One thing about this, who read the Scrum Guide when it first came out in 2001 or 2003, or has paid attention to its evolution? Like, when it first came out, it was 47 pages long. And I was talking to Ken Schwaber one night, and he was telling me about why now it's 17 pages. Because they recognize that they need it to be less prescriptive, and they need people to spend time learning about how they're working. So prescribe less, give them more principles, and then learn. So Scrum is actually trying to do this as well. We need to give ourselves time to discover and implement Kaizen opportunities. So don't overburden people. WIP limits help us do that. We need to create theories and experiments. We can only do this with quantitative data. If I think that if this little improvement is going to make us 10% faster, you should know whether it did or it didn't. And if it didn't, don't do it anymore. If it had no effect, well, maybe, there's qualitative improvements that might happen, but okay, well, we didn't actually achieve the thing, let's try again, because we all want to continuously improve. And for us, improvement is the delivery, the manufacturing of business value. We are the ones who are creating it, taking a business idea and making it valuable to the organization. Give yourself opportunities to fail. If you create a theory and you do an experiment, you have given yourself an opportunity to fail. And in failure, we learn what worked, what didn't work. We gain more knowledge about ourselves and about our organization. and that's where we learn from our mistakes. So this is sort of at the essence what the Kanban method is really trying to promote. So some of the benefits I've seen, who here's got Agile in their organization, or an Agile methodology, Scrum? So most Scrum teams, compared to traditional project management teams, I find the people are just happier. They're more empowered. So we get all those benefits of having sort of Agile methodologies and a better way of people working together, but we have a deeper understanding of demand and capacity. We have teams that are driven to constantly improve. They want to lower their lead times and their cycle times because that is how quickly they're measuring their work. And we are also exposing constraints. You would be surprised at how little time developers spend touching something, actually coding, and how much time they spend waiting. In the Kanban community, the average efficiency within an organization of touch time is between 5 and 15%, as measured by the community. So that's 85 to 95% of the time developers are sitting there, they're waiting for something. Or they're context switching. They might be just switching tasks. And again, I just think as soon as we put in WIP limits and we have the ability to measure our work, we reduce that burden that people have. They don't feel like the weight of the world is on their shoulders, and they get just happier, which is going to make them faster. Businesses get improvements from this too because you're measuring and working through this, you get better predictability. You actually get better agility, I think, out of Kanban because it defers planning and it doesn't necessarily want you to have big time boxes. As soon as a spot opens, the business could have been shuffling the backlog, the ready queue. This thing's the next most important thing. Let's pull it and get it through. It allows for a little bit better risk management, I think, because it's creating a whole bunch of little safe to fail opportunities. Because we are visualizing so much of our work and describing our policies so well, it actually provides better governance, tends to. And again, because the whole methodology itself is built to engage organizations in change, it is a better change management technique. So, this is all the good stuff. We understand how much work we have. We understand how quickly we can do it. And the people are improving, the teams are improving themselves. When you give people that opportunity, they will be empowered, they will own the improvements, they will pull the work. And the owning the improvement part is the key part to stopping people from being weird. Right? I'm not telling you to do this and you're going to be like, well, I don't want to do that. It's like, hey, I think we should do that. Okay, let's all go do that. It's a completely different dynamic. And again, the Kanban method, way back to why is this still a problem, is designed to help us make this not a problem in our organization. It's not going to, that's why it's not very prescriptive about tactics, but it should start to remove these problems from your organization. So, I have 5 slides, so just quickly, myths about Kanban. So, there's a myth that you may hear out there as soon as you start scourging around. Kanban is an agile methodology. The Kanban method, capital K, is not an agile methodology. It is an evolutionary incremental process change methodology. Agile methods may emerge. If you have a team that's chaotic, they're doing Kanban, they may arrive at Scrum. It's happened. They may arrive at Scrum But. They may arrive at Scrum Bon. But they're going to arrive at the process that works best for them because the Kanban method is helping them get there. So it isn't actually an agile methodology. It isn't. It can promote them to happen. So sort of following from that, you might hear the Kanban method competes directly with Scrum. There's a lot of Scrum guys out there who get mad at the Kanban method because they're feeling like it's sort of encroach on their territory. And that is not true at all. David Anderson, the man who created the Kanban method, or yeah, created it, I guess. You know, he never says that he wants to fight with Scrum. And we're sitting around at a conference or beers or whatever, and it's like, he just like, I don't understand why the Scrum guys get so mad. Because none of these, the only tactic that is a little bit contrary to Scrum is the pull-based mechanic, which if the Scrum guys stop for a second would realize they're doing in a bigger, just a coarser grain. So if anybody says to you that we have to do the Kanban method or we have to do Scrum, should come and talk to me, because it's actually not true. One thing that you hear often is that Kanban doesn't have iterations. And that is not, it doesn't typically use Scrum definitions of iterations, but cadences within your organization are as important to the Kanban method as an iteration. So an iteration is a time box. It starts on Monday, ends on Friday. That's just when it is. We do it because we want to do ceremonies. We want to have this measured approach, and that's all good. Kanban has ceremonies as well, ops reviews, whatever else might happen that you guys want to talk, like a queue replenishment meeting might happen weekly. You are going to have these cadences, but they don't have to be connected like they are in an iteration. In an iteration, we do iteration planning, we work, we do retrospective. In Kanban, what is the cadence for your queue replenishment? Iteration planning. Whatever it needs to be. And if you can get it down to being like no meeting, but the business is really engaged and they're just shuffling their ready queue, wow. No iteration planning meetings, right? You might have something, you know, where developers are allowed to categorize work or sort work, but we still have those cadences. Those cadences, those heartbeats are very important to the Kanban method. They're important to people. I shouldn't say they're important to Kanban method, they're important to people. So when a Kanban method finds that those things are important for people, getting them engaged, it should use them. So it is not, strictly speaking, iterationless. Work does tend to flow continuously, though, through Kanban systems. Kanban works for DevOps, but not for projects. Again, I don't know who made this distinction. A Kanban system is really just a process that pulls work through. The mechanics of starting up a project are completely different from running a project. What do you need to do to start a project? You usually have to do some sort of, how big is this thing? What's the financial tolerance of the organization to spend? Blah, 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 all that stuff like that. But once we start working, now the Kanban system can just work on that project. And if you're doing DevOps, like, you know, an operations group where they've got requests coming in, they can be measured on a Kanban board too. And finally, this is one that you will hear from some of the Scrum people, is Kanban is a mini waterfall method. And you'll see this because I don't know if you guys have, like that board that I had, and the classic sort of Scrum board is like new, dev, test, done. Right, so we got a board that looks like that. And the Scrum people are like, well, look, that's waterfall. Right? But they also do this themselves. They just do it every day. And instead of us planning to do this sort of every day, we just do it every item. So, and this doesn't look like any Kanban board that I have ever seen in actual practice. It's the canonical representation of just the basic Scrum board, because this is kind of the workflow of knowledge work. We get some request, we build it, we see if it worked, and then we say we're done. But when we look at the actual workflow that we want to visualize within an organization, it is not like that at all. There are little branches, there are these other queues that line up, we've got these wait states, there's all kinds of things that are just not quite like that. We want to make it as simple as possible, but only until we see what it actually is can we do that. So it is actually not a mini waterfall any more than a Scrum day is a mini waterfall. So I'm going to put these slides up. I know I should let you guys go, but this will be recorded. I'm gonna put this slide deck on SlideShare. I'll make sure that Dave gets the link, and you guys can all come back to this. Adoption is hard. If you're gonna do it, you need to find someone who knows how to do adoptions. And this is just kind of, imagine it has an ALM adoption services, and part of our thing is to first understand where you are, but then provide some leadership to help change people's minds. I'm an extrovert. I don't mind sitting up here and talking in front of you, but not everybody does like to sit up here and talk and put themselves out there for you know, rebuttals, or no, you're not right, or you know, it's not something everybody wants to do. Like, you guys are all good at whatever specific development discipline you are at, but you may not be good at transforming an organization, which is a skill. If you have these problems, find a leader, internally, externally, try and grow them, but it's important. Get some foundational knowledge. You guys have started down that journey. I hope you guys are excited about what you've heard today, and that you were interested in finding out more. If you guys want more conversations about deeper topics, I'd be happy to come back and talk about them again. Visualize your work. You would be surprised how much visualizing your work will catalyze change, because you will start to see bottlenecks. You can see them. Limit your WIP so that people are happy, and focus on high quality. Again, I can't talk about high quality enough. So this is just Kanban community stuff. If you want to get a hold of me, you can get me on Twitter at Agile Ramblings, or dwight@imaginet.com. Our website, visualstudio@imaginet.com. Thank you. Thank you very much.